In 2022, a lot of people felt it directly in their wallets. Going to the grocery store had stopped feeling like a normal shopping trip. Price tags seemed to change every week. Food was getting more expensive, energy was getting more expensive, and rents were rising. People were starting to realize they could buy less with the same paycheck. At the time, everyone was asking the same question: how far is this going to go? Today, though, the picture looks different. As of April 4, 2026, the latest data shows that annual inflation in the United States stands at 2.4%. In the euro area, the flash estimate for March 2026 is 2.5%. Across the OECD as a whole, annual inflation is 3.3%. So prices have not gone down, but they are no longer rising at the kind of out-of-control pace we saw in 2022. On top of that, wages in the United States have risen by 3.5% over the past 12 months. For many people, at least for now, that suggests pay increases are starting to outpace price increases. But this raises a very important question. If inflation is moving back toward normal, why are central banks still so focused on the 2% target? Why is the target not zero? Wouldn't it be better if prices never went up at all? This is exactly what we are going to talk about in this video. Because most people think of inflation as nothing more than prices going up. But for central banks, the issue is not just whether prices rise or fall. The real issue is whether the economy can keep functioning properly. So let's start with the most basic point. A certain amount of inflation is not as bad as people think. In fact, it is often necessary. Yes, that may sound counterintuitive. After all, nobody wants to pay more for the same product a year later. But in an economy, prices completely freezing in place, or even starting to fall, is not always good news. Why? Because mild inflation helps keep the economy moving. When people know prices are likely to rise gradually over time, they do not postpone their needs forever. They buy the car today, the phone today, the home appliance today, they invest, they spend. That spending becomes revenue for businesses. Businesses produce, hire workers, and pay wages. In other words, the system keeps moving. The logic is simple. Moderate inflation helps prevent the economy from freezing up. And the second point is even more important. Inflation is not just about prices. It is also about wages. In a healthy economy, the ideal situation is not only that prices rise slowly and in a controlled way, but that wages rise along with them. Better yet, wages should rise a little faster than inflation. And that is exactly what recent US data seems to show. Wage growth is running at 3.5% year over year, while inflation stands at 2.4%. That points to a recovery in real income. So then why do central banks specifically target 2%? Why not 1%? Why not 0? Why not 4%? Because for many years 2% has been viewed as one of the safest balance points for the economy. It is low enough that it does not rapidly erode people's purchasing power. But it is also positive enough to keep the economy away from the risk of deflation. And that brings us to the most dangerous side of this story: deflation. In other words, a general decline in prices. At first glance, that sounds great, right? If everything is getting cheaper, why would that be bad? But here's the problem. If people believe prices will keep falling, they start waiting. They do not buy today, they wait until next month. Then they wait another month. When you look at that behavior individually, it seems rational. But when it spreads across the whole economy, it turns into a major problem. As people postpone spending, businesses earn less revenue. As revenue falls, investment slows down. Then companies start cutting costs. And in many cases, the first hit comes to wages or jobs. The result? Less spending, less production, less investment, more unemployment. That is what is called a deflationary spiral. So for central banks, the worst-case scenario is not just high inflation. Very low inflation or even negative inflation can be just as dangerous. That is why institutions like the Federal Reserve and the European Central Bank do not want prices to stay perfectly flat. They want prices to rise slowly, predictably, and in a controlled way. Both institutions have made it clear in their latest decisions that they are maintaining the 2% target and will continue to act based on the data. As of March 2026, the Federal Reserve kept its policy rate range at 3.50% to 3.75%. The European Central Bank also left rates unchanged at its March 2026 meeting, keeping the deposit rate at 2.00%. The reason is straightforward. Even though inflation has come down, central banks do not want to fully take their foot off the brake until they are confident the improvement is lasting. So what we are really experiencing today is this: not a return to old price levels, but a normalization in the speed of price increases. That is a very important distinction. Because when people hear inflation has come down, they often assume prices themselves have fallen. But most of the time, that is not what happened. Prices are still rising. They are just not rising as fast as they were in previous years. And that is exactly why central banks do not target zero inflation. Because while zero inflation may sound appealing on paper, in the real world it can make the economy more fragile. A little inflation, when it stays at the right level, helps the system function. If it rises too much, it erodes purchasing power. If it falls too much, it can lock the economy up. That is the logic behind the 2% target. Not an economy that runs too hot, not an economy that is frozen, but a manageable balance somewhere in between. So in the end, we can say this: a little inflation is not just normal. In many cases, it is necessary for the modern economic system to function. The real issue is not whether inflation exists, but whether it remains under control. And that is exactly why central banks have a 2% target. Because economic stability does not mean prices never change. It means prices change at a pace that people, businesses, and markets can adapt to. That is it for today. If you enjoyed this video, do not forget to like it. Subscribe for more content like this. And do you think the central bank 2% inflation target is the right one, or should it be different? Let me know in the comments.